Welcome to another live edition of Who's Better Baseball, the podcast where we answer simple questions throughout the show about who is better in baseball. And no one is better right now than the New York Mets. 16-4 today, beating up the Atlanta Braves. How about that? This is my second live stream in one day. Already did a Locked On Mets show with the host of Locked On Braves to talk about that series. We will not be focusing on Mets Braves today. We got a lot of interesting topics to discuss. Patrick, how has your week been going watching some good baseball games?
Yeah, we're getting into that time of the year where the games are consistent, new series, new matchups, new storylines all throughout. What team is getting it done in a surprise fashion? What team isn't? What managers are on the hot seat? We're going to talk about a lot of that today. It's exciting time already here in the baseball season.
It's exciting, but also when you mention consistency, one of the most unfortunate things about this season so far is consistent injuries. Is this always what happens and we just forget about it? Is April always the month where all these guys are trying to get themselves into midseason form? We just see guys dropping like flies. Obviously, the pitching side of it has been covered, and we will also be talking about that a little bit. But you also now see in Chicago with the White Sox, Luis Robert, Yoel Moncada both go down. The probably worst story I feel like just because of the narrative the guy's been through is Trevor Story to go down with that devastating shoulder injury. Those three stand out. What to you really jumps though about those three guys going down right now?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Trevor Story is the one. I covered him a lot in his career. Great guy, stand-up player, great clubhouse leader. And for him to have that moment when he was ready to have such a bounce back year in 2024 and to stand up in front of those cameras and you could see how impactful that was to him, letting down his teammates, even though again not his fault at all, but him feeling like he had let them down when they were really trying to do something and they had a lot of momentum at the start of the year. And then at the end too, he says, but I'll be all right, kind of understanding that, baseball is a business and it's a game, but there's the other side where there's human beings at the end of the day. So it was nice for Story to get some love and support from fans in Boston, in Colorado, and all around the United States.
I think we forget, how much these guys love baseball at times. And that's a moment where you really see it just, having that reality hit you about going down. It reminded me of Jacob deGrom last year when he went down. He talked about, it being a special group. And man, it was a special group in Texas that he didn't get to be a part of after going down with Tommy John. In Boston, we're talking about who's better all the time there. I mean, that team has been far better than any of us expected. And yeah, they could keep it rolling, but Trevor Story at shortstop, a position that just killed them last year without Trevor Story, where they tried Kiki Hernandez. They filtered a lot of guys in there. No one stuck. When Story came back at the end of last year, he wasn't himself. Defensively, though, he just gave them such an anchor at such a crucial position. Now they got to try to overcome that. And that's a team that, again, could have conceivably been in the race. So I think this injury hurts more than the ones in Chicago. I'll talk about in a minute. But looking at the team perspective, how do they respond to this and still stay in the hunt?
Yeah, it definitely, as you said, Red Sox competitive, White Sox not so much. You feel more for the White Sox fans than anything. But right, the Red Sox, they've got some options in the upper levels of the minor league. Marcelo Mayer might be the next young prospect that we'll talk plenty more about in this show, but that could impact the major leagues. He's close to being ready. They've got a few other options in the upper levels of the minor leagues. They can move some guys around. It's just one of those times where this early in the season, you don't really want to dip into that depth, right? Like that can have obviously a negative impact. I think the Diamondbacks are going through that to a much lesser extent with the injury to Geraldo Perdomo, their top prospect. Jordan Lawler was injured even before that. So they're kind of running around trying to figure out a couple things with the options there. And as you said, as you started off by saying, it's the defense, that defensive anchor. And we've seen the Diamondbacks, the options that they've had at shortstop, made a couple errors, almost cost them a couple games in that Rockies series. So the defense definitely cannot be taken lightly now. In a world in which we understand exactly how valuable it can be and how much impact it can have on a game-to-game basis.
Yeah, it really can. And switching over to the other side of this injury coin with the White Sox, Losing Robert is rough. I don't think he was going to get traded this year, but he is the marquee player. So he's the guy that's selling tickets that people want to come out to see. So it's really tough for the fans. And then Moncada, that's just a really rough spot because they have Eloy Jimenez, who's hurt again as well. I don't believe his injury is quite as bad. Moncada could be done, and this would be his final year. There was some hope that he could go out this year, play well, and get them a little something at the deadline. That's what the White Sox are trying to do at this point. So it hurts their rebuild as far as having pieces to be able to move, and it also just hurts the general day in, day out grind of the season for a bad team. It just gets that much harder for a White Sox fan to buy in and want to tune into any of these games.
Yeah, on one hand, it does clear a pathway for some of those young guys to get opportunities, which is a positive. But to your point, if you're looking to get back into contention in maybe at the end of 2025, you have a good second half, but 2026, 2027, you only do that by acquiring more young assets for your veteran guys that are on expiring contracts. And so to not have that opportunity as much with Moncada, to an extent, Robert Jr. That's problematic, and it's hard to watch throughout the summer because you're not going to get that boost, that little bit of extra hope and hype to say, okay, we are a little bit closer to that goal in 2026, 2027. That won't be the case now with Moncada.
No, the White Sox are in a really rough spot this season. So we'll see what they have to even be tuning in for over the next couple of weeks leading into months. Let's move over to starting pitchers, which has been the biggest story in the sport. I do want to spotlight too. We've had a lot of great written content go up this week about this whole injury epidemic. Kevin Henry was able to talk to Brent Strom, the pitching coach for the Diamondbacks. He had some interesting thoughts. Strom, of course, has been a pitching coach forever. 3 decades nearly of experience. So good to get his take. And then Walker Buehler on the Just Baseball show had a really interesting conversation with our host there, talking about his journey with Tommy John and what's going on in the game. And I wrote up an article you can find as well at justbaseball.com, sort of recapping his quote. So we've covered a lot about what's going on here with the injuries. It's this focus on max effort, and that's causing these guys to go down. I was looking to prepare for this segment at our top 20 starting pitchers heading into the year. 6 of them have been hurt. Now, not all Tommy John. There's guys like Sonny Gray and Justin Verlander that will be back this year, but still, 6 of 20 have gone down. And so now looking at a league that's probably not going to have Spencer Strider or Framber Valdez, and definitely not going to have Shane Bieber, we wanted to dive into who are the exciting starting pitchers that could step into a top 20 of Major League Baseball right now. So we'll go back and forth. Patrick, give me a name that you're looking forward to watch, maybe take that step into being a real ace this year.
I think Brady Singer is that guy for me. He had a fantastic outing on Thursday, and he's just been this player that was supposed to be a part of a crop of young pitchers that ultimately never really developed the way I think the Royals were hoping following the 2015 World Series. To be able to say, okay, well, we put all of our eggs in that one basket. Let's kind of retool a little bit to make another big push. Didn't happen, but some guys, they just have their own timeline. And we're definitely seeing that now. You kind of hope Casey Mize can be in that same pool for the Tigers. But Brady Singer in 3 starts has been absolutely fantastic. ERA under 1 already at this point. And the Royals being that team that you and I have really kind of, put the shine on in many ways going into this season for all of the kind of smaller mid-range free agent moves that they made. Singer is really benefiting from some of the veteran guys like Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha being in that rotation. So for a young man that got his career started by paying off his parents' mortgage after getting drafted, you love a story like that. Now maybe he'll be able to, possibly buy them another house or 2. Should this kind of success that he's had in 24 continue for this season and beyond?
Yeah, Brady Singer is a guy that last year he was, front and center on Team USA in the World Baseball Classic, and he got knocked around bad in that tournament. And with a situation like that, I wonder how much carryover that had, where maybe he lost his confidence a little bit because he was on that upwards trajectory heading into last season and then just had an awful year. So it's great to see him now maybe with a full off season to process what happened, bounce back and be able to put up this good start. But I don't believe he's the ace on this team. I think it's Cole Reagans, and that's my next pick here. He looked so good down the stretch last year. He's one of the most electric pitchers in the game. And I think it's that electricity, that the ability to go out and punch out 14 in a given start that really separates some guys into that top 20 conversation. So I got Cole Reagans before I throw it back to you.
No, that's a great pick. I mean, especially as you said, you look at what he was able to do after coming over in that Rangers deal. It'll be interesting. We might be able to have to put together an all-star team, an Avengers style squad of players who was traded for Aroldis Chapman, because there are a lot of them out there, and Reagan's has to be on that list, no doubt about it. I think next up for me, when we talk about there being 15 to 20 aces that you talk about, this is a big game pitcher. This is a guy you can count on. He's a horse. He's going to make 30 starts, always going to be in the Cy Young Award conversation with, as you said, 6 guys down, a couple more questionable injuries here and there. There has to be the next group of players to come up into that fold. And for me, one of the guys that has been fairly consistent, but is probably in the more of the back end of the top 50, that's shown really well in 3 starts, has to be the Astros' Christian Javier, surrounded by so many of those guys that came up around that same time. Of course, Framber Valdez being the one that really extended things a lot for himself, and he's a bit banged up right now. You hope he ends up all right. We know that Justin Verlander is going to be coming back for the time being. Christian Javier is the Astros ace. We know they got a 4-10 start. Not the best ways to get Jose Espada's career started as a manager with that organization. And Javier, who's had some success in the postseason, now maybe it's his time to put it all together and say, all right, well, I'm a lot less Jose Urquidy, and I'm a lot more Framber Valdez as far as my effectiveness is concerned. So for me, he's probably my second guy that we probably should keep our eye on a little bit more, and maybe starts getting into that perennial ace conversation. Who would be next up on the list for you?
It's another guy we've talked about a lot this year, and that's Tariq Skubal for the Tigers. He's just got, again, nasty stuff coming from the left side, and is clearly the ace of that Tigers rotation that doesn't have a lot of dependable frontline guys. They added a couple veterans in Jack Flaherty and Kenta Maeda, but they need a bona fide ace if they want to compete in that division. That's a fun team to watch right now in Detroit. So I like Skubal. And I'll also just throw in as well, we have some guys that have always been there that are showing out as well. That's what we'll kind of close with this segment here. Nathan Eovaldi went right back front and center in the playoff run last year, and he's healthy again, and he's doing it again. That's always the question with him is he going to be able to stay healthy for 30 starts? But when he's on the mound, there's no question this guy's one of the horses in baseball. Jose Barrios had a really nice year last year. He's continued that. And Carlos Rodon clearly was an ace, got paid like an ace, did not pitch like an ace. And now, once again, Garrett Cole out, he's an ace and pitching like it up to this point.
And I'm going to throw in a fourth name too, if I can, because if we're talking about 15 to 20 true aces, right? And maybe there's even less than that, but those 15 to 20 names you hear every year, even if a guy takes a step backwards, you still want to put him in that Cy Young conversation. He's kind of in the conversation, but he's always hurt. And through 4 starts, 29 strikeouts and 24 innings, I think Tyler Glasnow kind of fits into this conversation to a degree. I don't think he's even received a single vote for Cy Young Award in the American League. So, a lot of that has to do with being healthy and putting it together for an entire season. But if you're going to look for some new names and some guys to go out and say, hey, this is must-view TV, you got to see this guy on the mound when he starts. I think Tyler Glasnow really has ascended to one of those top 20 guys.
I think at the end, you might have found the best candidate because he had a start the other day where I think it was 14 strikeouts, just blowing guys away with that fastball. And last year, I mean, the reason he's never gotten Cy Young votes, he set a career high innings pitched last year, and I believe it was in the 120 range. I mean, he just has never done it. And I think he has made our top 20 starting pitchers list at Just Baseball a couple of times, even though he hasn't put it together, because there's enough people that we have that vote on this, from our staff that just have seen him when he gets on the mound and you see a healthy Tyler Glasnow. Few guys look more dominant. He's huge. He has big stuff as well. So, Tyler Glasnow, if this is final year, if he went to LA, They sprinkled some Dodgers magic on him, and he's finally healthy. And he makes 30 starts and gives them 180 innings of Tyler Glass now. You know what? He might. Everyone was talking about Yoshinobu Yamamoto winning a Cy Young. It could be Tyler Glass now in the National League.
Dodger dust is real. When it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Your guy, Noah Syndergaard, he was a Met, so I'm going to say he's your guy. It didn't work for him, right? It did work for a Tyler Anderson, also having a really good start with the Angels this year. So I think Glass now kind of checks off all of those boxes where he's kind of on the outside looking in, hasn't been reliable, not a new kid on the block, because look, we can talk about young guys and that's where the Yamamotos and the Bobby Millers come in. But if we're talking about the consistent tier 2, number 2 starters that almost immediately become number one starters because of all those injuries, I think we hit the nail on the head with a lot of those players.
We did for sure. And let's now go from exciting up and comers to managers. It's a weird transition. I couldn't really land that plane well. We're going to managers though that are on the hot seat. It's early. The lead into this conversation is Skip Schumacher, whose seat is boiling hot as it came out that they avoided his club option this offseason, which can be one of two things, but either one of them is Schumacher's on his way out. It could have been a good faith, hey, you're not our manager. Here's one last year with your team. Then you could be a hot free agent after the season. It could be, hey, you're not our manager. We're going another direction. However you look at it, though, the bottom line is I think Skip Schumacher is managing his last season with the Marlins, and it looks like it with the way this team has come out so flat to start the year.
I don't know if he's on double secret probation. You decline options at the end of the year, not 2 weeks into a season. So yeah, that one was certainly strange to see, and you understand why. If that was going to happen to anybody, it would be the Marlins with their 2-10 start. So yeah, we go from up and comers, from down and leavers. I think that's what we'll call these managers that are struggling right now. One of the other teams that are out there right now that have one of the worst records in baseball would be the Colorado Rockies at 3-10. And I think a lot of people would probably be surprised to learn that Bud Black is not really on much of a hot seat. And a lot of that has to do with the expectations by the Rockies and their front office. And owner Dick Monfort, he's the one really pulling the strings, and he doesn't really like to make waves. And to get rid of a manager, that makes waves in certain ways. I think plenty of people would say, well, look at the roster you gave Bud Black. That wouldn't be fair for him to go. And then on the other end, you say, well, all right, maybe some of his choices that in the lineup are kind of questionable. There's a lot of players just not pulling through. But the next guy that comes in, is the next guy really expected to get that much more out of a 103 loss roster that didn't add anybody significant during the offseason? So again, strange to say at 3-10, Bud Black is not necessarily on the hot seat, but depending on how things go, it would be interesting to see if Dick Monfort and the Rockies front office perhaps use Bud Black as somewhat of a scapegoat for what could be the second consecutive 100 loss season. I tend to think that might not happen, but anything is possible at this point. This is uncharted territory for this franchise.
It all comes down to expectations. You look at the White Sox, the Athletics, the Nationals. These are teams that went into the season without much expectation. So the managers aren't going to be held quite as accountable. If we're looking at managers who could be fired even mid-season, I think there's 3 that jump out because it's teams that do have some expectations here. And we'll start with John Schneider with the Toronto Blue Jays. That's a team that is, on borrowed time. They got a couple years left with Vladdy and Bo Bichette. They have to win. I'm not saying he's going to get canned right now. I mean, look, what are they? 6-10, or was it 6-7? 6-7. Jeez. How many? I had them playing a lot of games, huh? There's 6.
Yeah, only 2 teams went to Korea. Do you know about some special trip to Puerto Rico that they played game?
I thought so.
Exhibition games.
I thought so. I was looking quick. Maybe I saw the 7. I thought I was at 1. I'm like, they're not 6-1. I don't know how that happened for me, but still, that's a tough division, and that's one spot that I look at and say, all right, let's just say they have a horrible May. Could something happen there? Didn't Schneider get the position when they fired a manager mid-season? Do I have that wrong?
Yeah, no, he did come in at mid season, so he himself is already new there. So that front office really needs to figure out some things because they've already sent that message, right? And sometimes that's what happens when you get rid of a manager. You're sending message, partially to the organization, but more along the lines of that clubhouse too. And so you're right. Someone like Pedro Grifol, the White Sox struggling. We've talked about how many injuries they've had, but what message does that necessarily send to the players? Are you really going to get that much more out of them for doing something like that when the manager has to fall on a sword? And then conversely, if you have a team that has a young core of players, which in the case of the Rockies, I think that's very much true. You have some of those guys. You're hoping that they're going to be a part of the next contender. So perhaps by swapping out that manager, you're saying, hey, you better get things in gear because the expectations for this year might be a certain way, but going forward, we're really kind of pinning a lot of the future on you, and so you're accountable for that to a degree. So let's step things up. So I don't know if Toronto can go back to the well and do that, but to your point, it's all about those expectations. And 6-7, that's last place right now in the AL East. And you have this year and next before Vlad Guerrero Jr. and before Bo Bichette become free agents. George Springer's getting a little bit older as well, and he'll be a free agent at some point. So you only have so many bites to the apple before, you got to do something extreme like let the manager go.
You know what could happen, Patrick? They could get swept this weekend, and then they'll be 6-10. How about that? Then it would really be bad.
Do you know something that I don't? Okay.
It might happen there. The other two that we have marked here, Rocco Baldelli with the Twins, and I feel like he has been established. I believe he won Manager of the Year when he was a rookie manager, and so I feel like he's ingrained in that organization to the point where I wouldn't expect him to go. At the same time, you have these upstart teams in the division that could make the Twins look pretty bad this year, and that's where they might need a scapegoat. I wouldn't imagine that's a midseason thing, but it could still happen. And then the other one is Ali Marmol with the Cardinals, who had the most shocking contract extension for a manager, I think, ever. Because if we, before the season, said, who's on the hot seat, and we had to each pick a manager, we would probably come to the same conclusion. It'd be Ali Marmol because of how much of a disaster the Cardinals were last year. And yet they didn't want a lame duck status. So they gave him an extension, but they could always go back on it and say, yeah, no, just kidding. Congrats for the extra money we've handed you, but we're going to move on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. He was that was a curious one because of some of the, issues between him and some of the players. And again, is it more the players than the manager? But that remains to be seen. I think we're a ways off from saying Bob Melvin's on any kind of hot seat. Like he's one of those guys where they're going to get a season plus before you say, it doesn't kind of work out. What about someone like Dave Martinez? Now, I don't think there's any major expectations for the Nationals, but he's been there a while, right? He's there for the World Series win in 2019. They've got a young core of players, and if maybe there are things going on more behind the scenes with the clubhouse and the development of certain players, maybe again, he almost gets scapegoated, not for the organization saying, hey, we should have won 78 games versus 72, but letting the clubhouse know like, hey, your actions can have consequences. And maybe we need somebody that's either more of a player's manager, right? Or more of a hard ass, whatever it could be. I could see him in that situation, right? Or any manager in that situation being placed on the hot seat should things more behind the scenes not go right.
I think the average kind of lifespan for a manager is probably even less. It's probably like 3 years, but I think Davies maybe in his fifth year. I think he came in 2019 when they won the World Series. I think he was a rookie manager. That helps as far as, hey, he's our World Series winning manager, and it's him and Patrick Corbin are like the last vestiges of that team. Talk about a roster that turned over quickly. So we'll see. I would wonder if this is his final year of the deal, that whatever contract he has, I could see that as sort of all right, we're going to close the book, turn the page. Next year, it should be a full year of Dylan Cruz and James Wood. And maybe the Nationals want to start that era with a different manager in that dugout. So that's a good call as well. Let's get out of doom and gloom, though. Let's talk about excitement. Let's talk about some young guys who are ready to take baseball by storm, and just the perfect confluence of name and age. the 3 young rookie studs that people are going to be watching this season, all named Jackson, all exactly 20 years old. These guys were, most of them, teenagers throughout all of last year here. You got Jackson Merrill, who was maybe the guy we're most surprised to have started on opening day. Jackson Churio, who got the contract extension before he played, that sort of indicated, all right, he's the guy in Milwaukee. And now the most highly anticipated debut of a top prospect, the number 1 prospect in baseball, according to us at Just Baseball and pretty much every other outlet, Jackson Holliday is up. Which one is going to be the best player this season, Patrick?
That is a fun question to answer, but very much a hard one. I'm going to put Jackson Merrill on the back burner here and really say it comes down to Jackson Churio and Jackson Holliday. Holliday just has great baseball IQ. All these guys do, but has so many things going for him that it's interesting to think about what his ceiling could be, because I think he has the best floor of anyone. I mean, this is someone that was around the 2007 Rockies when they went to the World Series. He was in their clubhouse as a kid hitting wiffle balls, past reporters' heads. And we've all seen those clips of him swinging a wiffle ball bat. And, when your dad's a big leaguer, that's going to give you a certain kind of polish that's going to allow, again, your floor to be that much better. And I was thinking about this from the perspective of, will he have a better career than his father? And, there's about 350 players in the Hall of Fame, or rather people in the Hall of Fame. They're not all players. And there's been 22,000 major leaguers that we've seen in the history of the game. And Matt Holliday, while he's not a Hall of Famer, he's very much in the Hall of Very Good. And I think you could almost make a case for him. It's not a great one, but I think you could make a case for him as saying, hey, look, he does have somewhat of a resume, not good enough, but you could at least put a resume together for him. So he's really like in the top 1,000 players out of 22,000. Like, we're talking top 4 percentile. How can Jackson Holliday, despite being the number 1 overall prospect right now, have a career that's that good? That is such an undertaking. That is, it's just a difficult task that almost makes me say that I hope he proves me wrong. It seems insurmountable to have as good of a career as his father did. That being said, back on track, I kind of tend to think maybe someone like Jackson Churio might end up having that better career right now, and he's got a little bit extra big league experience, of course, which is nice. Maybe a little less pressure. He's operating in not in full secrecy, but he's up there in Milwaukee. A little less attention in the NL Central. So for right now, I think I would kind of lean towards Churio over Jackson Holliday.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question for sure to look at those two. But I actually also want to touch a little bit more on what you were saying with Matt Holliday, because there was the hype video that came out before he debuted, and in there they had Matt saying he used to be Matt Holliday's son, now I'm Jackson Holliday's dad. I don't know if it's quite there yet. I mean, we'll see what happens here. He's gotten so much hype as a prospect that his name is certainly standing on its own. But you look at the career of Matt Holliday, 7-time All-Star, 4-time Silver Slugger, and a career .299 batting average, which is really impressive. He got over 2,000 hits, over 300 home runs. You're right. It's numbers that probably don't get induction into the Hall of Fame, but a great, great career. I think when it comes to Jackson Holliday trying to live up to that, I don't know how much power he's going to tap into, how much he's just, like you said, the floor is so high with him. He's going to hit for a high average. He's going to get on base a ton. He's going to be sure-handed in the field. He's just a really great player to plug into that Orioles team. I don't know if he's going to be perennial all-star or not. And that's sort of what his dad was. If you're a 7-time all-star, that's a perennial all-star. So that's going to be a long, long conversation that we will be having to monitor his career. But to, again, bring it back to this season, yeah, I like your pick of Jackson Churio because he's electric and he might have a better opportunity to shine on a team that doesn't have as many guys. Jackson Holliday is batting 9th right now. Jackson Churio, I think, is still batting leadoff. So, or at least near the top of that lineup. That's a distinction there where Chourio might just have a better opportunity to, have a completely open green light every time he touches first base to steal. Jackson Holiday, you might have to think a little bit because the top of the Orioles lineup is up, and you might not want to take the bat out of their hands. So, due to circumstance, I think Chourio might have the better numbers this season.
Yeah, great point about where Holiday is at in the lineup, and I think that's going to help him a lot,
Yeah.
to protect him. But at the same time, you also have Jorge Mateo that's there that can play his position. Ramon Urias. So there are a couple options. Jordan Westberg was more second base than anything last year. So there are some players there now. If the Orioles are calling Jackson Holiday up, it's because they want him to play regularly, so he will have that opportunity. But it's like you said, I think Chourio is going to have an opportunity to have a little bit more fun, slightly easier competition there in the NL Central rather than that volatile AL East. But if anyone's going to be able to handle the pressures of that division in the AL East, it's going to be someone like Jackson Holiday, who already got a taste of it, frankly, in the International League. I talked with so many players from NL West franchises, and people are a little more easygoing out on the West Coast. Same is true, in the minor leagues and in the Cal League, the Northwest League, even to a degree the Texas League. But if you're talking Eastern League and the International League, AA and AAA on the East Coast, Red Sox fans, Yankees fans, Phillies fans, they can get volatile, and you can really feel what it's like as you get closer to the big leagues, what that pressure is like and how the fans can get right on top of you. So Holiday's already had that experience. It's going to be exciting to watch him play, regardless of if he is the best Jackson or the worst Jackson, which is still the third best Jackson.
Yes, in this group for sure. And I think, one of the points you made there that is interesting. If we were to just make a pick right now, if we had to lay money down on who's going to have the better season, there is a world where Jackson Holiday gets sent down, and I don't think there's a world where Jackson Chourio gets sent down. And the reason I say that is because the Orioles could just plug in Kobe Mayo. I mean, they have a million guys that they could plug into their infield. Now, do I think that's going to happen? Absolutely not. I would say it's maybe a 5% chance that he's going to struggle to that degree. But if we're throwing that into the mix when Chourio is pretty much guaranteed to be in that lineup no matter what, the contract already, and their alternatives just aren't as good in Milwaukee as they are in Baltimore, I think that's another thing that you just sort of put into the Chourio camp of saying he might just have the better rookie season. If we went to the career, though, that's where I don't know. That's where it might tip back over to Jackson Holiday. He's the number one prospect in baseball for a reason.
Yeah, Jackson Holiday is going to be in games to help try to win the game, whereas Jackson Chourio might be more about that development. We've seen him bat leadoff. He's hit 8th or 9th in the order too, depending on the opposing starting pitcher. So he definitely has a lot more of a pillow. But I think in many ways Jackson Merrill also has somewhat of a pillow, surrounded by all those stars. Really getting the rub from his teammate there on his left, our right, in Fernando Tatis Jr., saying, hey, I was just like this kid coming up. And, to make your major league debut in South Korea, not very many players. I did go back and look. I get obsessed about certain things. And I was thinking about writing an article. I was like, no one really cares about this. But like players who made their major league debut on foreign soil, not including Canada, of course. And so for him to be a part of that whole circus, and still to be able to go out there playing a brand new position, like that's really impressive. And so in a lot of ways, I think Merrill and Chourio are both, doing it in a really good setting that's a little bit softer than in the middle of the AL East against the Red Sox at Fenway Park. I mean, think about that. When I alluded to Jackson Holiday, being in the clubhouse of the Rockies in 2007, that's where Matt Holliday made his first World Series appearance. Eventually did win a ring with the Cardinals, but Jackson Holiday is a little kid, getting carried around by his mother at Fenway Park. Lo and behold, that's where he makes his major league debut, wearing number 7, a number that his father wore for a long period of his career in St. Louis. So it's amazing how those things can be so cyclical in baseball. It's why we love the game so much.
It is, and there's no better place to make your debut. I think that's got to be. I've been to Fenway, and that's the stadium that just it even when you're in it, it almost doesn't feel real. It's just like you're stepping into history, and it also, like, that monster is so close when you're actually like, you see it on TV and it jumps up, but when you're in person, like, man, like, I could get a hit off that monster. And then you look at the guy pitching, like, okay, I probably couldn't get a hit off that monster. But yeah, that's a great place to make your debut. And it's going to be awesome to see all three Jacksons. The Jackson 3 may be here.
And I tell you what, because we already know Tyler O'Neill heard us pick Michael Conforto over Tyler O'Neill. He went off. And now Jackson Merrill, the clear third place finisher in the Battle of the Jacksons. Folks, Jackson Merrill about to have a big week. That's the Who's Better Baseball bump.
Let's look at the betting odds at BetMGM and see Jackson Merrill's Rookie of the Year, because you might want to take that because of the jinx we just put on him. Let's move over to a segment that you pitched for us here, the nitpick. Why don't you start us off here? What bothered you the most this week in baseball?
Man, I don't get bothered by too many things in baseball. I am an old school guy. I feel like, and I'm a historian of the game. I'm still a student of the game, but I can be old fashioned. That being said, I'm fine with the game evolving in different ways. So I'm very far from a curmudgeon. I almost get upset at people that get upset at things. When everyone was up in arms about the netting and not being able to see, literally no one said anything, as soon as they stepped into the ballpark, because that netting's so thin, you forget that it's there. That being said, the Fanatics uniforms, MLB, Nike, all of that, everyone's up in arms, and it's not great. Now, I'll say when I first reported to spring training, the lettering was bad. And some of the people that I talked to said, yeah, this is going to be kind of a problem, especially when you're on the backfield and you got 65 guys, half of which are non-roster invites. I don't know who I'm looking at from a distance because I still don't know these guys yet. That was a problem in spring training. I kind of got used to it just a little bit after seeing it every single day. Then you see it on TV and games in spring training. It doesn't look right. Then you see it in the big league ballparks and it looks even worse. And I'm in the press box at Coors Field looking down, and I have to know the numbers of the players, which you think that would be something easy to memorize, but not always the case. So you can't make out the lettering. And then, of course, the other day in Detroit, Riley Green slides home, and I'm almost surprised it didn't happen sooner. His pants just explode off of his body. Now, the material is thinner. I got to feel the difference between last year's pants and this year's pants. Thankfully enough, I was in a clubhouse that actually had this year's pants. Some teams still don't have theirs yet. They haven't had a chance to wear their City Connects. So I think all of the grumbling about the uniforms as a whole, just how they look and how teams haven't been able to get what they've needed, and just the changes that have been made. Atlanta's, their belt loop, had such fine detail to it. Now that's just gone because there needs to be this uniformity in it. Even some of the colors in the Navy were changed from Atlanta and some of those other teams. And it's bad. So there's not often times in which people are in an uproar over something where I join them, maybe because I try not to get too upset, and I might have certain information that they don't. In this case, I'm with the pack. These uniforms are really bad, and something needs to be done about it. But nothing will, not this year. It's already too late.
It's ridiculous that it got this far. I mean, like, where was the quality testing throughout that process where someone could have pointed out, hey guys, you realize that these jerseys aren't going to perform any better. They look worse. What are we doing? And
Sweating through the uniforms.
it's bad. It's outside of the injuries, it's kind of like the worst thing in baseball right now. It's just day in, day out seeing what some of these guys look like. And that Riley Green slide was a great example of it, to see the pants blow out completely. What's got me bothered, it's an unfixable problem. But what bothers me is that there's been stadiums that have been built in the last 15 to 20 years that didn't have a retractable roof, because so many games are getting banged for rain, and it throws everything into whack. And I know, speaking personally as a Mets fan, we've seen it a lot. There's been, I want to say, 4 rainouts up to this point, which is a lot when we're only a couple weeks into the season. So it can't be fixed, but April rain is just something that it picks at me. It's something I got to nitpick at. It's frustrating.
Yeah, and then you have Toronto, who has a retractable dome. They they don't have their home opener until the second week of the season. They just had theirs on Monday, so they should be almost an automatic bid. Now, granted, we're talking about delaying a home opener in a week or so. That is a shame, and I would think also too with some of these teams in the East with having a retractable roof, it does allow you to have some events during the off season, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've for those folks that are maybe dabbling and getting back into pro wrestling, they're saying, all right, well, it was a little bit cold in Philadelphia, but the Royal Rumble in January was held at Minute Maid Park, a couple of years ago in Houston, because you put the roof back over that bad boy, and all of a sudden you can have an indoor event. Makes your front office, makes your team a little bit more money. So, there's definitely some financial positive impacts that come from having a roof like that. I know that it's not also financially solvent for everyone, depending on the layout, the construction of it. It can take up some extra property too, right? That's additional real estate that you would like to have. I don't know if you've ever been to Seattle, but with their retractable roof, it's like a whole other half of a city block that just has to house, the retractable roof. So, yeah, in general, man, it stinks to get games bagged early on in the season. It's hard to build that momentum. Mets obviously, have suffered from that, and you have the double headers. What is that doing to your bullpen? A rain out and a double header like that, it can really mess you up for about 2 weeks or so until you really get back on track. And it is what it is. But at the same time, hopefully there can be a better way to go about sorting this out.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And what other issues that we got here that are people talking? We've got the ABS system is something where it's always frustrating when you're watching a game and umpires are missing calls by a foot, and there's no way to challenge them. I think the ABS system is kind of a cool wrinkle. For those of you who aren't aware of what they're doing in the minor leagues, teams get like 3 challenges, and if you win a challenge, you hold on to it. If not, and either the catcher can make a challenge call or the hitter can make a challenge call. So if your hitter sees a pitch on the black or sees a pitch that they believe wasn't called a strike, but it was, point is they can challenge. So what's your thoughts on the conversation there when it comes to the ABS system?
I think we're ready for it. I think I'm okay with it. I kind of pushed up against it just a little bit at first when the conversation started to really get going in 2018 and in 2019, partially because there was no guarantee that the technology is there, and I think there are still some wrinkles that have to get worked out, which it's important to know. I also kind of worried about the impact on youth sports, right? When you trickle down from Major League Baseball that are going to have, invest millions of dollars in various technologies for this strike zone. And we already know they have that with StatCast. Then colleges need to, have that kind of technology to compete with what's going on in the baseball world. Right. And then it gets to lower levels. I mean, it's already bad enough in youth sports. If you're an umpire and you miss a call, there's going to be a parent that might stalk you out to your car. It's no good. And so it's only going to get worse, right? Because of something like the ABS. But I think implementing it so that it's still mostly a human call, right? There's going to be some human error there, but all right, there's a little bit of wiggle room if something does seem to be egregious. And I think the best part about it too is it's rather instantaneous. It's not a 16-minute delay. It's nothing like what the NBA has going on. It's not even a minute and a half to 2-minute delay when they review a play over at first base. Not the case at all. It's pretty quick. You see it up on the scoreboard. It's like a big moment. Everybody kind of holds their breath, and then you see it just touch a corner of that box. It's a strike. Everybody goes crazy. I think that's going to add an exciting element. And so, you know what? It's on the way, and I think we might even see it in 2025.
It adds strategy to the game too, because if you have a guy like the Tigers, for example, they're telling Javi Baez, you're not ever allowed to challenge anything because we don't trust your eye at the plate. There's some strategy that goes to it where our team's going to hold their challenges just for when they're pitching instead of when they're hitting, because getting that extra call could mean so much more. So that's going to, I think ultimately it's going to add more to the game, not take away from it. So I'm excited to see that get implemented.
Would Javi Baez possibly swing at a pitch that's borderline and still tap his helmet and say, I just want to know if that was a strike, because I'm having an argument right now with AJ Hinch and this will settle it. And he just burns one on a strike 3. He's like, see, I told you that was a good pitch to swing at. Maybe we'll see
Maybe.
something like that.
We could absolutely see that. You never know with Javi Baez. Let's actually talk about his team a little bit here as what to watch this weekend. We're to go through some of the top series to look at, and Tigers playing the Twins. Can the Twins, reclaim their spot as far as being one of the better teams in this Central, or do they fall further down with the Tigers beating them up here? Who do you like in that series, and what other series are you looking at this weekend?
Yeah, Minnesota's definitely going to have to rebound here against Detroit. They are gonna have Pablo Lopez going in that series. Bailey Ober, Louis Varland. So they've got some of their better guys going out there, which is important for them to just stay relevant. Obviously, in the AL Central, we know it's winnable. You can't. We've said it before. Look, you can't win a division in April, but you certainly can lose it. That being said, losing 2 out of 3 to the Tigers wouldn't be the end of the world for the Twins. Wouldn't really put Rocco Baldelli on any more of a hot seat than he already is. But I think it's a big one, especially when I know your guy. Again, I'm going to keep saying it. Your guy Keith Hernandez, I think, just today was pointing out that maybe it's a little bit silly. You got to play every American League team if you're an NL squad, and then that limits the amount of games in division. Well, that now makes those divisional games that much more valuable. Instead of getting 19 different opportunities to see what another team has and maybe try to put them away 12 out of 19 times to make up 5 games, whatever it were. Now there's much less than that. So I think this is kind of an important one for Minnesota to say, hey, let's go out there, win 2 or 3 because they're worth a little bit more since it's a team in your own division.
It really is, and it's a really good time to see what they have, especially Detroit, with such a good start to go up and measure yourself against the team that won that division. It's going to be fun. Similarly, we got Astros Rangers Part 2. Already saw it once, but it was a 4-game series that was split 2-2. Even though the Astros haven't gotten off to a good start, they didn't lose that first series. Now we'll see. The Rangers are hot, so the Rangers can kind of really put it to the Astros, have them even further out of the race and take the edge in the early season series here. So that's one that we're definitely going to be watching here.
Should be Dane Dunning against JP France on Friday night. And then in the weekend, lefty Andrew Heaney, Ronel Blanco. Is this guy going to throw a no-hitter again? No, but it's fun to pretend. And then Nathan Eovaldi, and then against Christian Javier. So that is the who's better baseball matchup of the weekend. 2 dudes that can inject themselves in that top 20 conversation with so many players banged up. I like the battle of the Pennsylvania Turnpike. You've got Phillies, Pirates. Pirates still hanging in there with a 9-3 record. Phillies doing their thing. You kind of at this point can't be worried about their regular season record. As long as they're winning 86 games and they get into the postseason, they're good to go. So Rob Thompson, Topper, really has nothing to worry about as far as that's concerned. I do like the rematch of the 2015 World Series, Royals Mets. I think that will be somewhat of an interesting one. And then 2 teams that are off to really good starts, Yankees, Guardians. I think that's a series that's going to have a little bit of juice in it.
For sure. And the last 2 I want to mention before we close, Padres, Dodgers, rematch of the Soul Series. That's going to be awesome. And then Battle of the Jacksons, to bring it all full circle, Brewers, Orioles squaring off. So we'll see Churio and Holiday in the same series this weekend. So a lot of great baseball to be played.
Yeah, I love it. Like, the weekend is when it's all about, where even if you are getting rained on, even if your team's game gets canceled, you can still turn on a West Coast game. It's going to be sunny there. If it's a little bit gloomy in the Northeast, there's going to be some superstar players there going head to head against one another. So baseball's heating up. I don't know about you. I don't follow the other sports quite like I do baseball. If anything, I ignore them intentionally because I just love baseball that much. And this is just a great time of the year where everything's just getting going. And is this guy legit? Is this guy not? Who are we worried about? That's why I watch the games and why I love talking with you each and every week, Ryan.
Absolutely. And for me personally, it's mostly baseball. I've turned into just a playoff basketball fan. So now my season's about to start on that front. But it's going to be great to get into this. This is a really nice part of the sports calendar where you have NBA, NHL playoffs. You got the baseball season in full swing, and football's not around, which most people hate. But for me, I don't really mind it much.
There's
We
the
will
draft, right? You got the
a
Masters
draft.
coming up. We just had March Madness. This is very much a sweet spot time of the year for sports fans.
It really is. And we will be back recording again on Sunday this week. So make sure you check that out. We're going to continue to go live on every show on the Just Baseball feed on Twitter. But we appreciate all of you. If you're watching and joining us there, head over to our YouTube channel. Give us a subscribe. Follow us over there. If you didn't catch the beginning of the show, you came in at the end. We'll be breaking up all the different segments, putting them up as individual videos throughout the next couple of days. And then they could also follow us on Twitter at
Who's Better BB?
Who's Better BB. We'll be back on Sunday.